That afternoon, the sky over Charleston lit up with a soft orange glow, the kind only a southern summer could bring. The harbor view sat right on the Ashley River, where the breeze carried the salty scent of the water and the faint sound of a distant ship horn. Inside, round tables covered in crisp white cloths gleamed under candlelight, the glow bouncing off crystal glasses. It was the night I'd been waiting for all these years, my daughter Emma's college graduation party. I'm Caroline Hayes, 55 years old, sitting at the center table, watching Emma in her ocean blue dress, her graduation cap still perched on her head. Laughter, the clinking of silverware, it was the soundtrack of a classic American family gathering. And for one brief moment, I thought everything was perfect. Then Richard, my husband of 28 years, stood up. He lifted his champagne glass, all eyes turning to him. I thought he was about to toast Emma, say something heartfelt. But instead, his voice rang out, steady and cold. Caroline, I've decided to start a new life. Without you. The laughter died instantly. Forks froze midair. 50 people sat there stunned, their eyes darting back and forth like they were watching a play no one had signed up for. Somewhere, a fork clattered to the floor, the sound sharp in the suffocating silence. Emma, sitting right beside me, froze too. Her wide eyes, framed with fresh mascara, said it all. I felt her hand trembling on her lap, as if she couldn't believe what she'd just heard. In the corner, Sophie, the young woman nearly 20 years younger than Richard, shifted uncomfortably, avoiding everyone's stares. People expected me to cry, to scream, to storm out in shame. But I smiled. Slow. Calm. A smile that made the room even tighter. I looked straight at Richard and whispered, just loud enough for him to hear, "Thanks for being honest." I reached into my purse, pulled out a cream-colored envelope, and placed it beside his plate. His brow furrowed. His voice stumbled. "What's this?" "Something for you to read later," I said, my tone steady, as if nothing had happened. Then I turned to Emma, kissed her cheek, and whispered, "I'm proud of you, Emma. This is still your day." My voice stayed calm, but inside, I was a storm, roaring just like the summer seas beyond the harbor. I stood up. My dress brushed the chair as I moved. Chin high, I looked around the room, friends, co-workers, neighbors, all of them witnesses to the life I'd lived for years. Please, everyone, enjoy the party. I hope you all have a lovely afternoon. The air was heavy. No one answered. I walked away, my heels clicking against the wood floor. The heavy door closed behind me, sealing off the whispers that finally broke loose. Outside, the June sun poured down, blinding and hot, but freeing. I drew in a deep breath, and for the first time in years, my lungs felt wide open. Then, behind me, the door burst open. Richard's voice, high-pitched and panicked, no trace of his calm left.
"Caroline."
"What the hell's in that envelope? What did you do?" I didn't look back. I just kept walking, a small smile tugging at the corner of my lips. Because I knew that envelope was the start of a plan I'd been building for months. And from that moment on, the game was no longer his. Driving away from the restaurant, the wind from the river rushed through the window, tossing my hair into a mess. I glanced at the rearview mirror and saw a 55-year-old woman staring back. Deep eyes, a face carved with years of experience. That woman was me, Caroline Hayes, the one who had spent more than half her life keeping the flame alive for a family that only looked happy from the outside. When Richard and I first married in our 20s, I was working at a finance company in Charlotte, North Carolina. I had real potential, once dreamed of becoming a CFO. But when Richard decided to start a small coffee shop, I was the one who stepped back. I quit my job to help him and to manage the mortgage on the house we'd just bought. Back then, I believed my sacrifices would be paid back with love and stability. But the coffee shop failed. Then came a tech startup that collapsed. Then a woodworking shop that didn't even last 6 months. Every time Richard lost everything, I picked up the pieces. I balanced the books, took on extra hours at a local accounting office, made sure Emma's tuition was covered and the mortgage was always paid on time. I remember one winter night in Georgia when Emma was still in high school. I sat at the kitchen table alone, next to a cup of coffee gone cold, checking every bill one by one. Richard was asleep on the sofa, still dreaming of his next big idea. I remember whispering to myself, "When will it be my turn?" Then I closed the ledger, turned off the light, and kept going the next morning. I once had my own dream starting a financial consulting firm for women, helping them stand on their own feet, especially those going through family crises. That idea sat in a drawer for years. I always told myself, after Emma goes to college, after Richard finally finds something steady, but those after moments never came. Not until today, when the truth spilled out in front of dozens of people. Richard loved being the center of attention. He could light up a room with a joke or two. But I see now I've been nothing more than the shadow, quietly cleaning up after the lights went out. And in that silence, I let countless chances for myself slip away. But as I left that restaurant, I knew all those years of sacrifice weren't wasted. They were armor. They were training for the battle I face now. Because I'm the only one who knows every number, every dollar, every weakness Richard has. And this time, I won't stand behind anyone ever again. 3 months before the graduation party, I started to notice numbers that didn't add up. After managing our family finances for over 20 years, I knew every electric bill, every insurance payment, every tuition charge by heart. So when I saw small, steady transfers leaving our joint account, I knew something was wrong. At first I wondered, maybe Richard invested in something and forgot to tell me? But my gut whispered this wasn't like the other times. Those withdrawals weren't business expenses, they were going to a stranger's personal account. I stayed quiet. I didn't confront him right away. I didn't yell. Instead, I started collecting. One night, while Richard slept, I opened my laptop and followed the money trail. The string of numbers led to fancy restaurant bills in Atlanta, jewelry bought at Tiffany, even a deposit for a beachfront apartment in South Carolina. Each discovery felt like another twist of a knife. While he told me, "We need to tighten our belts for retirement," Richard was secretly buying things for someone else. That someone was Sophie Turner. She'd shown up at weekend parties with a bright smile and steady confidence. I used to think Sophie was just a young colleague asking me for advice. Once she'd called about negotiating a salary. I'd even invited her to our family Christmas. And yet, behind my back, she became the partner in all of Richard's new dreams. What hurt worst was that many people in our close circle already knew. I saw it in the way they avoided my eyes, in the half-finished sentences whenever Sophie's name came up. They chose silence. The betrayal wasn't just from my husband. It was from people I'd trusted. One Friday night, I sat in the car, hands shaking as I read messages Richard had left on his iPad. "Tomorrow after the graduation, we'll officially start our new life." Another one said, "She suspects nothing. Caroline trusts me completely. That's her biggest weakness." I set the iPad down, my head spinning. How ironic. The weakness he named was actually my strength, my trust. From that moment on, I knew it was time to turn my silence into a weapon. I started seeing a lawyer. I backed up every bank statement, saved every photo, every restaurant receipt, every text. Most important, I dug up the prenuptial agreement Richard insisted on signing before the wedding. There was a small but sharp clause: if adultery occurs, all shared assets shall go to the betrayed party. I read that clause over and over, a mix of bitter and gleeful in my chest. Richard had tied himself up nearly 30 years ago. Now I only had to wait for the right moment to pull the knot tight. Under the warm kitchen light, I carefully logged each piece of evidence, listening to the clock tick. Emma was still at school, blissfully unaware of the storm waiting. I looked at the family photo on the wall, our smiles on Myrtle Beach years ago. That picture felt warped now. That night I promised myself, Richard may think he's running the show, but this time the board belongs to me. And I won't lose a single move. When all the pieces fell into place, I knew I couldn't just walk out of this marriage with empty hands. Richard had been planning for a year. I'd spent nearly 3 decades building a home and propping up his dreams. If he wanted to turn Emma's graduation into a stage for his dramatic escape, I'd turn it into a trap with no way out. I started by seeing an experienced lawyer in downtown Charleston, Philip Grant. His office was small, in a red brick building near Marion Square. He sat behind a dark wooden desk, silver-framed glasses on, listening as I laid everything out. When I handed him thick folders, bank statements, photos of receipts, printed texts, he nodded, respect in his eyes. "Caroline," he said, his voice firm and low, "with this evidence and the adultery clause in the prenup, you don't just have a chance to win. You hold the upper hand." I left his office with a detailed plan in my head. Every day, I acted like a strategist preparing for a long campaign. I reviewed our financial records, noting every suspicious transaction. I changed passwords on my accounts and moved my long-saved money into a separate fund Richard didn't know about. Most important, I learned to keep my face calm. At home, I still cooked dinners and texted Emma about her finals. With Richard, I still smiled and listened while he rattled on about his new future. He thought I was clueless, and that fake trust was the perfect cover for my plan. One evening, Richard called Sophie from his study and put the call on speaker. I sat in the living room and quietly opened a recording app. Richard's voice came through. "After the graduation, I'll go public. In front of everyone, Caroline won't make a scene. She's too proud to embarrass herself." My hand clenched white, but I stayed silent. That recording became the sharpest blade in my arsenal. Step by step, I prepared for D-Day. I figured Richard would pick a dramatic moment, and I was right. He planned to wait until after Emma graduated, turning the celebration into his own spotlight. He assumed I'd be silent because I wouldn't want to shame our daughter. He was wrong. The morning of the graduation, I quietly went to the local courthouse and filed for divorce, attaching all the evidence. The papers were sealed right away. In my purse, the cream envelope waited inside, a copy of the filing, proof of the affair, and the recording. Richard thought he was getting ready to leave me and start a new life. The truth was, I'd already cleared the path for him to walk into his own undoing. And I knew, the moment the Harbor View door shut behind me that afternoon, the real battle was just beginning. That sweltering Charleston afternoon, the sun still hung heavy in the sky as I drove home. Our white colonial house sat in the quiet historic district, magnolias lining the path with their sweet perfume. It was the place Richard and I had lived for 15 years, once filled with family laughter, now nothing more than a battlefield waiting to erupt. I opened the door and stepped inside. Golden light spilled over the hallway walls, lined with family photos. Smiles at the Outer Banks, a Christmas by the glowing tree. For a moment I paused, breathing deep. Those memories were just shells now. An hour later, Richard's car roared into the driveway. The front door slammed open, echoing through the house. He stormed in, face flushed with rage, gripping the cream envelope I'd left behind. "Caroline." His voice cracked, sharp and frantic. "What the hell is this? You filed for divorce on the very day our daughter graduates?" I sat calm in the living room, laptop closed, a neat folder stacked on the coffee table. I looked up and met his eyes. "I just thought it'd fit your plan," I said evenly, my voice as still as water. "You want to start a new life, right? I just helped speed up the paperwork." He shook the envelope, hand trembling. "You don't have the right. I've calculated everything. We have history, Caroline. 28 years can't be thrown away over one mistake." I gave a small laugh. "A mistake?" I stood, stepping closer. "You secretly funneled money for a year. You bought jewelry, wined and dined Sophie in Atlanta, put down a deposit on a beach condo. You planned to humiliate me in front of everyone, to turn me into a joke. That's not a mistake, Richard. That's a strategy." His face paled, but he tried to push back. "That prenup expired long ago. I've got lawyers, Caroline. You won't get a dime." I picked up the folder, opened it, and read aloud, clear and sharp. Clause 12. Fidelity clause. Remains valid for the duration of the marriage. Do you want me to play the recording of you and Sophie plotting in this house? Last week. Richard staggered and dropped onto the sofa, sweat gathering at his brow. You recorded me? In South Carolina, only one party has to agree. And I agreed. My voice was slow, deliberate, my eyes locked on his. In that moment, every mask of confidence shattered. He buried his face in his hands, mumbling, "Oh God, I've lost everything." Arms crossed, I stood tall, my tone steady but razor sharp. "No, Richard. You lost everything because you chose to. I'm just keeping what's mine." He looked up, voice shifting, desperate now. "Caroline, we have a past. I was there when you lost the baby. I took you to Charleston for our 10th anniversary. You can't throw that all away just because." I cut him off. "It's because of all that history, Richard, that this betrayal cuts so deep. But I've already moved through the pain. Now, it's your turn to pay." His phone rang loud. He glanced at the screen, then quickly silenced it. I smiled. "Sophie's waiting, isn't she? I bet she's eager to know why that condo still doesn't have a signed lease." Richard froze, eyes wide, realizing I had it all. He tried one last cry, his voice breaking apart. "Caroline, you're destroying my life." I turned away, purse already in hand. "No, Richard. You destroyed it a long time ago. I'm just flipping the light switch so you can finally see what you've done." Afternoon light poured through the window, shadows stretching long across the wooden floor. In that glow, for the first time in years, I felt steady. No more trembling. The first battle was over. And I knew this was only the beginning of everything yet to come. That night I sat in the quiet kitchen, the only sound the ticking of the wall clock. My phone buzzed nonstop messages from friends, relatives, even people who'd been at the restaurant earlier. I ignored them all, except one, Emma. "It's okay, sweetheart. This isn't your burden. Enjoy your graduation.
I'll talk to you tonight."
But Emma couldn't wait. Less than an hour later, her silver car pulled up outside Laura's house, Richard's sister, and the one person I trusted. Laura opened the door, and Emma rushed in, still in her blue dress, mascara smudged with tears. She fell into my arms like she used to when nightmares woke her up as a child. "I don't understand, why didn't you say anything? Why'd you let him ruin my day like that?" Her voice broke. I held her tighter, feeling her shoulders shake. "I didn't want to weigh you down during your last semester. You worked so hard for this day. I wanted it to be yours." She lifted her head, eyes red and wet. "But in the end, he ruined everything anyway." I couldn't argue. Laura handed Emma a glass of water, then sat beside us. "My brother dug his own grave, Emma. Don't you dare blame your mom." After a long silence, I made my choice. I laid it all out for Emma, every piece of it. The bank transfers, the jewelry receipts, the beachfront condo, and finally, the recording. Richard's voice filled the room. "After graduation, I'll go public. Caroline won't dare make a scene. She's too proud to embarrass herself." When it ended, the room was still. Emma gripped her glass, tears spilling onto the table. I knew he was acting different. Always on his phone, dodging questions. But I never imagined this. I put my hand over hers. No one wants to see the ugly side of someone they love. But the truth always finds a way out. Just then, a knock at the door. Laura stepped out, then returned, face tense. "It's Richard. And Sophie's with him." Emma shot to her feet. "He can't give us 1 minute of peace?" Richard barged in, his face tight, Sophie trailing behind, eyes downcast. He pointed straight at me. "Caroline, stop this. Unfreeze the accounts. We can settle this privately." Emma moved in front of me, her voice sharp. "Privately? Was it private when you stood in front of 50 people and dumped my mom? Was that your idea of private?" Richard froze, finally meeting Emma's eyes. "Emma, this doesn't concern you." "Doesn't concern me?" She laughed bitterly. "You turned my graduation into a weapon to humiliate her. You drained our account while I worked 2 jobs just to buy books. Don't you dare say this doesn't concern me." Sophie touched his arm gently. "Greg, maybe we should go." But he shook her off, eyes locked on me. I stayed seated, my voice steady. The accounts will stay frozen until the court decides. 3 more days, Richard. You can wait. Sophie turned, her voice trembling. What accounts? How much have you been hiding from me? Richard's face flushed. He looked away. And for the first time, I saw the cracks forming in their alliance. Emma's stare was unflinching, her voice firm in a way that startled me. Leave, Dad. I don't want to see you again. Silence dropped heavy as stone. Richard opened his mouth, but no words came. Finally, he turned and walked out, Sophie dragging behind him. When the door shut, Emma collapsed into the chair, tears streaming. I've never spoken to him like that before, but I can't take it anymore. I wrapped my arms around her, hearing her heart race against mine. Standing up for what's right hurts. But sometimes it's the only thing we can do. Laura poured more wine, raising her glass. Then, here's to new beginnings. I looked at Emma, then at the glass in my hand. And in that moment, I knew the battle was far from over. But I wasn't fighting it alone anymore. 3 days later, with Charleston baking under the first real heat of summer, I got an unexpected call from Laura. Caroline, they're here again. Richard and Sophie are standing at my door. I looked around the little office I'd just rented downtown, my desk piled with case files. I wanted to focus on prepping for the preliminary hearing, but clearly Richard wasn't going to wait. I shut my laptop and drew in a deep breath.
All right.
Let them in. We'll talk one last time. When I reached Laura's house, the scene was set for another showdown. Richard stood in the middle of the living room, hands on hips, face red. Sophie was different. She kept shifting, twisting her fingers around her handbag. That usual confident smile was gone, replaced by nerves. Caroline, this has to stop, Richard started, his voice pitched high. Unfreeze the accounts. We can split things fairly. I crossed my arms, standing tall. Fairly? After you drained tens of thousands from our joint account to fund an affair? After you planned to humiliate me in front of Emma and the whole community? Don't talk to me about fair. Sophie winced, stepping forward. Caroline, I know you're angry, but he never told me about the secret accounts. I was lied to too. Just then, Emma, still staying at Laura's, walked out from the kitchen. Her arms crossed, eyes cold on Sophie. You knew he had a family and you still stepped in. Don't play the victim now. Sophie's face flushed, head down. I thought he'd divorce first. Divorce before what? Emma cut in, her voice shaking but hard. Before ruining my graduation? Before turning my mom into a joke? What did he tell you, Sophie? Richard jumped in, voice cracking. Enough. This is adult business. Emma let out a bitter laugh. Adult business? You stole from our family, betrayed my mom, and you call that adult? You dragged me into it the second you turned the most important day of my life into your stage. The room went still. Richard turned to Sophie, looking for backup, but she only stepped back, whispering, Greg, you lied to me too. You said everything was ready. Now I find out even the beach condo isn't signed because your credit was denied. I couldn't help a thin, icy smile. That's right. I dealt with the leasing office myself. They called the house and I picked up. Sophie's eyes widened. She turned to Richard. You never told me. He fumbled, reaching for her. Sophie, you have to understand. But she grabbed her bag, turned, and walked straight out. I'm not signing my name onto this mess. Handle it yourself. The door slammed. Silence hung heavy as lead. Richard turned back to me, his voice faint. Caroline, do you really want to destroy me this badly? I stepped closer, meeting his eyes. No, Richard. You did that yourself. I just pulled back the curtain so everyone could see. Emma moved to my side, her eyes blazing. Dad, I don't even recognize you anymore. If you've got any dignity left, leave now. Richard opened his mouth, but nothing came. Finally, he turned and walked out, shoulders slumped like a man who'd lost everything. When the door closed, Emma turned to me, her voice trembling but sure. I hate that I had to say that, but he deserves it. And I'm proud you didn't back down. I wrapped her in my arms, my heart pounding. In that moment, I knew that harsh truth can sometimes be the only medicine that heals. And from here on, the legal battle ahead wouldn't be a fear anymore, it would be the road I was determined to walk. 3 days later, Charleston woke up to steady rain. I slipped on a navy coat, clutching a thick folder of documents as I walked into the county courthouse. The granite floors gleamed. The air carried the smell of old wood and strong coffee. This wasn't a place I ever pictured myself standing in, but in that moment, I felt stronger than I ever had. My lawyer, Philip Grant, walked beside me, his voice calm and steady. "You're ready. Don't worry. Let the evidence speak." Richard was already there, trailing a young lawyer who looked fresh out of law school, his suit hanging loose on his frame. I couldn't help but smirk. Classic Richard when it mattered most. He rushed, careless as always. The courtroom was small but solemn. The judge, a silver-haired woman with sharp eyes behind her glasses, opened the file and looked straight at the table. Her voice rang clear. "We're here to review the divorce petition of Mrs. Caroline Hayes and Mr. Richard Hayes. Mrs. Hayes accuses her husband of violating the adultery clause in their prenuptial agreement. Mr. Hayes denies the claim. We'll hear from both sides." Richard's young lawyer stood, his voice shaky. "Your Honor, this prenuptial agreement has expired due to the length of time that's passed." The judge narrowed her eyes, flipping through the pages.
Clause 18.
It states plainly, valid throughout the duration of the marriage, including divorce proceedings. No expiration date. Counsel, did you even read this document in full? The room buzzed. Richard leaned in, whispering furiously to his lawyer, his face flushed. I sat still, hands clasped, heartbeat steady. Philip rose, laying out the evidence, bank statements showing steady transfers, jewelry receipts, restaurant bills, and finally, the recording. Richard's own voice filled the room. "Caroline won't dare make a scene. She's too proud." The judge set down her pen, tapping it lightly on the bench. "There's sufficient evidence that Mr. Hayes violated both financial transparency and the adultery clause. I order that all joint accounts remain frozen until a full financial review is complete. Mrs. Hayes will remain in the family home until a final ruling is issued." Richard shot to his feet, voice breaking. "Your Honor, this is unfair. I can't live like this." The judge fixed him with a cold stare. "Mr. Hayes, this is the result of your own choices. The court will reconvene in 30 days. This session is adjourned." The gavel struck, sharp and final. Out in the hallway, Richard chased after me. His face was pale now, panicked. "Caroline, please, 28 years together. There has to be a way. Don't do this." I stopped, turned, and looked at him for a long moment.
It did mean something.
"Until the day you decided it didn't. Now I'm just doing what you left me no choice but to do." I walked away, his footsteps echoing behind me, hollow and desperate like the sound of a man who realized too late he'd lost it all. Outside, the rain kept falling, cold but cleansing. I lifted my face to the sky and drew in a breath. And in that moment, I knew I'd taken another giant step, no longer the victim, but the one in control of my own story. 2 weeks after the preliminary hearing, news spread through our small Charleston community. People who stayed silent at the graduation party were now whispering behind Richard's back. A few called to offer hesitant support. Others just wanted details to satisfy their curiosity. I stayed calm and said, "Gregory and I are getting a divorce. These things happen."
I didn't need to explain.
The truth spoke for itself. Richard's world fell apart. The grand promises he made to Sophie disappeared. The accounts stayed frozen. The beach condo deal fell through. The deposit on the luxury car had to be canceled. Sophie vanished as fast as she'd shown up, leaving Richard in a rented unit near the industrial park. I didn't gloat. I just saw it as the natural end of a game he started. While he struggled, I started to rewrite my life. I rented a small office on King Street. It was one room with a window looking out on the busy old town. I hung a simple sign, Hayes Financial Transitions. On day one, I sat at an old wooden desk, hands shaking as I set down a fresh stack of files. I'd dreamed of this moment for years. A few weeks later, my first client walked in, a woman in her 40s, newly divorced and terrified she couldn't support her 2 kids. She sobbed as she set the papers down. "I never handled the money. He always did. Now I don't know what I have left." I took her hand and felt a rush of something familiar, my own memory of sitting alone with bills piling up, heart tight with fear. "We'll do this step by step," I told her. "You won't go through it alone." Hope flashed in her eyes. In that moment, I realized this work wasn't just a business. It was how I turned my pain into power to help others. Emma called often from her new apartment in Atlanta, where she'd started a marketing job. "Mom, I'm so proud of you. You didn't just survive. You're making something great for other people." Hearing that filled me with a quiet joy. This new life wasn't easy. Some nights I sat alone in the office, watching the street darken, wondering if I had the stamina to keep going. But thinking of Emma and the women who needed a hand made me keep pushing. I wasn't the wife who fixed my husband's failures anymore. I wasn't the shadow at parties. I was Caroline Hayes, the founder, the advisor, the woman in charge. And on this doorway to a new life, I realized something. Revenge might soothe the heart, but building a new life is the real victory. The day of the final hearing came, and Charleston was glowing under golden sunlight, so different from the steady rain of the first session. I wore a simple gray dress, hair pinned back, a folder of final documents in my hand as I stepped into the courthouse. The air was still, the only sound the click of heels on polished stone. Richard was already seated. He looked worn down, his once expensive suit now wrinkled, his eyes sunken. Beside him sat a new lawyer, older and more seasoned, though the exhaustion on both their faces was impossible to hide. The judge opened the file, her voice firm and clear. "The prenuptial agreement has been confirmed valid. The evidence of adultery is undeniable. Accordingly, Mrs. Caroline Hayes retains ownership of the family home, the majority of shared assets, and the retirement account. Mr. Richard Hayes will keep only his personal property and self-earned assets." The gavel struck, echoing like the final mark of a long chapter. I closed my eyes, breathing deep. 30 years of marriage ended in minutes. But instead of emptiness, I felt free. Richard turned to me, his voice rough. "Caroline, I made mistakes. Is there any chance?" I met his gaze, not angry, not bitter, just calm. "No, Richard. That door is closed. I hope you find peace, in your own way." For a brief moment, something flickered in his hollow eyes. "You deserve happiness. I wish you that." Maybe for the first time in years, he spoke a truth. Outside, sunlight warmed my face. Emma was waiting on the steps. She rushed into my arms, holding me tight.
"You did it, Mom."
"Not just for you, but for me too." I hugged her close, felt her heart racing, and knew our future had changed forever. 6 months later, my little office on King Street was too small. I moved into a bigger space, hired 2 young associates. Hayes Financial Transitions now had a name. Women came when their lives had collapsed, searching for financial confidence again. One late afternoon, I sat in the new office as the sunset spilled through the windows. Emma dropped by, setting a Starbucks cup on my desk with a smile. "You know, Mom, if Dad had just told the truth from the start, he might have kept half." I laughed softly. "You're right. But sometimes people get so blinded by greed, they can't see the value of honesty." I looked around the filing cabinets, the planning boards, the women waiting outside for guidance. And I realized I had walked the whole road, from pain, through betrayal, to rebirth. That envelope I set down at Harbor View wasn't just an ending. It was the key to a new door. And behind that door, I didn't just find justice. I found myself strong, independent, and full of hope. I closed the office door gently as I left. Outside, Charleston glowed under golden lights, the scent of jasmine drifting through the warm summer night. One chapter closed, another began. And I knew, from this moment on, I'd never again be just a shadow standing behind someone else.